All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there, and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here, alongside Sam, of CFC Central. And this is our match preview for Chelsea's Champions League fixture against Atalanta. That's right, an opportunity for Chelsea to hopefully pick up 3 maximum points to push themselves deeply into that top 8 grouping so they don't have to play those 2 extra nasty Champions League games, and we can just bypass those and head deeper into the competition. But Sam, as we get into this one, I think the biggest bit of news that we saw on the day was that Enzo Maresca said, nope, nada. You are not seeing Cole Palmer in this fixture. So get that idea out of your head. Don't even think about it. It was something that we had game theoried a little bit on in the last preview podcast, and even in the conversation Nick and I had in the review podcast that we did from the match over the weekend against Bournemouth. No Cole Palmer in this match. No party, maybe? Or you still feeling pretty good about what Chelsea can do in this one?
Yeah, I think it's just about managing him well, and I think you and Nick put it very succinctly in the review pod, saying there's been talk about him being fit for 2 weeks, and obviously we had the red card against Arsenal, but you need to play him to match sharpness. You need to get him slowly into the frame of things. Obviously, after a groin injury that has persistently troubled him for the longest time, so I think that's a good decision by Enzo Maresca. It's sort of like a takeaway from his Conference League experience where he's saying, okay, I'm not afraid to, make these changes if it means leaving a half-fit Palmer, who's probably not going to play more than 45, 60 minutes in this one back home, and let him recuperate and minimize the travel, then I can appreciate the decision. And obviously, one more good update, saying that it's not a fracture, not a collarbone fracture for Liam Delap. So no timeline given to us, Dan, but if it's a dislocation, then probably going to be a little sore. Make sure that there's a little bit of physio there to ensure that there is no rehappening of that injury recurrence. So I think 2 bits of good news, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely like getting some good news from the press conference that Enzo Maresca does beforehand. Has not always been the case, but definitely, again, seems like we're managing Cole Palmer to the best of our ability. Seems like Liam Delap maybe not as injured as we thought it might be after the weekend fixture and the post-match press conference. So those are good signs. But again, if you haven't joined us for a match preview podcast before, or if you have, welcome back. We do like to just get through a little bit of conversation about how the opposition has been getting on. We'll talk about their style of play. We'll look at some of their strengths back to front. We'll take a look then at what are some of those weaknesses, areas, or opportunities that maybe Chelsea and the team can take advantage of. And then we'll get into a conversation around just some of the considerations that you think Enzo Maresca is going to have to consider for this one, whether it's lineup or player availability, player selection, how he's going to attack certain situations. And then Sam and I will get into it with some predictions, both some standard scoreline ones and then also our on the ledge predictions. We're trying to give you just a little bit more fun, and sometimes they come true, which is always interesting to see. But Sam, as we get into this one, it is Atalanta. It is a bit of a trip for Chelsea to go get involved in this match. It is a team that, not necessarily having the best season in Serie A at the moment. They currently sit on 16 points, just to give context. Top of the league right now. AC Milan and Napoli both have 31 points. Inter is at 30 points. So it's pretty tight top of the table. 6 points would put you in bottom place for Fiorentina right now. So Atalanta kind of firmly in that like mid-table range where they're not at risk of being necessarily at the bottom. They're 10 points off of it right now, but another 10 points actually doesn't even see them into 4th place on the table. So again, firmly in the center there. Just any thoughts or feelings? Again, they lost over the weekend, after winning 4-0 in the Coppa Italia. Feels like they've had a little bit of back and forth seasons so far, some good, some bad. Very Chelsea in a way, though our league position much more favorable than theirs.
Yeah, I think I was browsing through a lot of fan forums and trying to figure out what the fan sentiment is regarding the scheme of things, and apparently people are a little happier because Ivan Juric, the last coach, absolutely furious with him. Results were really bad, and obviously, Dan, we're seeing this with Liverpool also. When you lose a long-standing manager, like Jurgen Klopp, and in this case, Gianpiero Gasperini, who, in my opinion, one of the best Italian coaches, extremely underrated. When he left, there was always going to be some turbulence. There was always going to be, just a lot of seismic shifts in the way the team was going to be set up and they were going to play. So I think that's hit them hard. And if you look at just their legacy in the Champions League under Gasperini, they beat some really good sides. They gave Barcelona a run for the money. I think Paris also was quite an interesting game for them. In the last 19 Champions League games, only two home defeats under Gasperini. So that's something in terms of just how well he was coaching the side. And Atalanta's attack were known to be some of the most ferocious attackers because Gasperini was so good at coaching them. Duan Zapata comes to mind. Um, so many really good attackers that he's drilled to absolutely make the most out of transitions. So now they've lost him, they've lost Juric, and now the path has led them to former Monza and Fiorentina boss Raffaele Palladino. So this is an interesting bit of trivia, Dan. Palladino and Maresca were both together at Juventus for a short time in the 2003-2004 season. I'm just going to read out a couple of names in that Juventus squad, okay?
Do it.
Gianluigi Buffon, Gianluca Zambrotta, Lilian Thuram, Antonio Conte, Pavel Nedved, Alessandro Del Piero, Antonio Conte, and Mauro Camoranesi. So, I mean, the Juventus of the heyday. So both of them spent some time together. Apparently, Palladino in his press conference said that he's been very good friends with Enzo Maresca, and he since then, like, they've basically stayed in touch and had a good rapport. So very complimentary of our playing style of what Maresca's done. So yeah, I think it's going to be quite an interesting match.
So I guess with that considered and that out of the way, again, we've talked a little bit about just what their league table form, what their league table's at, where they are in a form perspective. Can you walk me through again some of the style of play, some of the things that are working well for them, just what we should expect to see? Because I imagine most, not all, most Chelsea supporters who are focused on the team, focused on the club, may not have watched much Atalanta, watched much Serie A this season. So, what are they looking like? How are they deploying? And what are the things that we should just kind of consider as we start to conceptualize what it's going to look like on the pitch?
I think what Palladino has done really well is go back to what worked for Atalanta. Obviously, the squad was assembled keeping Gasperini in mind. So a lot of the profiles in the squad are meant to play that brand of football. Having attackers who can lead transitions by themselves, having a back three that is very solid, good in the air, can defend the box. So basically, he's stuck to the 3-4-2-1, and he's tried to implement the same game model, high pressing, man marking across the pitch, a highly vertical style of play to try and blow away opponents on transition. So I would say it's a slightly diluted version of Gasperini. The attackers we will talk about later on, but under Gasperini were quite devastating. And I think the change from just going one center forward versus two center forwards, which you often saw for Atalanta, I think that's been the difference. And Palladino himself has said that he's got a lot of different options in attack, especially center forward, which is not dissimilar to kind of situation that we find ourselves in. So it'll be interesting to see how he lines up. But one thing is for certain, another back three, back five situation for us.
And maybe just as we kind of talk about a little bit more of that back three situation, can we go into the defense and goalkeeper specifically? I mean, I think they do have a highly aggressive, I think is the way that you would refer to it, back three with the wingbacks going very, Pep Guardiola wide, as it were, in terms of how he thinks about teams playing.
Yeah, I think that would be the accurate way to go about it. Reminds me a little bit of Inter Milan, to be honest, like just the way the back three shifts, and there are a lot of rotations and a lot of positional fluidity that you see happening. The goalkeeper is Marco Carnesecchi, who's quite a decent shot stopper, not really very good with his feet, and Atalanta really don't want to play out from the back too much. So I would say it's more about going long to the striker, going long to one of the wingers, or even the wing backs making runs into the forward line. So basically, our defense has to be quite switched on to those long switches or diagonals from behind. And I mean, shot stopping wise, he's quite a decent goalkeeper. almost made a major error. I think it was against Fiorentina where the shot just basically dropped between his legs and he didn't know where it was and just cleared, I think, or he got to it first. But otherwise, quite solid. The back three that you mentioned is quite fluid, and it's basically it switches to sometimes to a back four, and one of the center backs is allowed to push in and push up the pitch when they have possession. So Kosunu, who's on the right center back slot, for example, he pushed up to almost right attacking midfield position against Fiorentina, and he received the ball there unmarked, and he unleashed almost a Fikayo Tomori versus Wolves kind of shot, which just curved into the top corner. So the centre back is allowed to push up. They're allowed to basically take liberties in possession, go up the pitch. So they will be quite aggressive. The wing backs on the side will most probably hold with, and they're given the license to be quite high up. Like you mentioned, it's all about the wingers being able to track the wing back. So if one of our wingers goes to sleep, then you can see one of their wing backs basically pushing up into those higher slots. So uh, at the center of defense is Isaac Hein, who's quite solid, very good in the air, quite good on the ground also. So he will be quite close to whoever is playing center forward. On the right hand side, we mentioned is Kosonu, and on the left side, we've got Berat Jimsiti, who's the Albanian center back. He can play all three slots, the left, right, and center. So quite accomplished in that position. But it is, I think, Kosunu who you have to be a little, I would say, not cautious, but you have to keep an eye on because he does get adventurous. He's given the freedom to push up, and that can be a strength and weakness depending on how Atalanta are playing.
And then if we continue looking at just the team as it were, as we move into the midfields, I think there are some individuals who have a very kind of specific way of playing, and there's also one familiar face in the lineup as we think about former Chelsea players who are kind of contributing in that area as well.
Yeah, there are two, to be honest. One is Mario Pasalic, who was in the Chelsea academy, Croatian young guy who had a red hot streak in between where he was scoring headers for fun under Gasperini, and he's quite senior now, so he will be basically either deputizing in central midfield or coming up in those um, Casade positions behind the centre forward, making runs into the box. So the other one, obviously, you mentioned is Davide Zappacosta. He is has actually switched flanks. He's a right-sided defender, but he's now functioning predominantly on the left-hand side. He's an injury doubt. He was basically out with the flu, so nobody knows whether he's going to be ready for this one. But definitely very good from set pieces. If you give him in swinging free kicks on the left hand side of the pitch, then he's going to create some very good openings, has a very nice delivery on him. Also got some good crosses. Can also hit bangers like we saw in his Champions League first goal that he scored, if you remember. I think, was it against Karabakh? I don't remember. It was 6-0, right? That he smashed from, the right hand side of almost like 30 meters out into the top corner past the
Yeah,
goalkeeper.
the
So
question of was it a
um,
cross or was it actually a shot, and we believe
it
that it was
doesn't
a
matter.
cross,
It
as it
doesn't
were.
matter. It doesn't matter. You if it goes in, it was always I was going for it. There's no other answer. So he's definitely going to be somebody, if he's fit, he's going to be quite accomplished compared to the young raw defender that we got under Antonio Conte. On the other side, you've got Raul Bellanova, who's very very aggressive wing back, will also bomb up and down all day, quite quick also. So whoever it is that starts on the left hand side, whether it's Kittens, whether it's Garnacho, whether it's even Pedro Neto, I think they've got their work cut out for them. So he's decent. I mean, defending wise, decent, but will be quite heavy on his intensity going up and down. So the wing backs essentially will work as auxiliary wingers. They will go up there, they will push the two attacking midfielders into the narrow zones, and they will try to latch on to long balls and give our fullbacks a lot of issues because our fullbacks will have to keep one eye on multiple players. So that's something that you have to be very careful about. In midfield, there's a quite a solid pivot of Martin De Roon, who's the touch central midfielder, and Edison. Both work very very hard, quite industrious, also very good at pressing. Edison in general is a very high action, high intensity box to box CM, very very good in terms of his defensive actions, will clean up in between and help Atalanta sort of launch transitions against us. So he's going to be very away from the ball, but keeping the midfield solid and clean. De Roon is usually like the deeper pivot, so he can receive back to goal. He will be the one orchestrating build up. So most of the times, if you can shut him off in those central positions, then Atalanta sort of struggle to play through the center. They will usually go long to the front line as much as possible. So I think that's the pivot. Edison again, will he play? Will he not play? Will it be Pasalic? Will it be somebody else? That's a question mark. But if it's fit, I believe like that's the strongest pivot that we might come up against.
And then as we just kind of again push forward one last time and think about the attack, as it were, who are we looking at in terms of being the biggest threat if we're kind of ranking amongst the, whether it's the attacking mid, whether it's the actual center forward, the wingers, like who are you looking at as the ones who are giving this Chelsea team the most problems during the match?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is quite simple. Like I mentioned, Dan, the wing back sort of pushing up into those width positions will allow the two behind the center forward to move into the inside positions, and where I would say the biggest threat lies is the Belgian. I don't know if I can call him Wonder Kid anymore, but he was when he broke out. But Charles de Ketelaere, he's an inventive floater who will pick those little pockets, who will drift from side to side. Very crafty, great vision. He's also got some very nice footwork, Dan. So don't be surprised if he goes for a shot and sits somebody down, switches to the other foot, and gets a shot away. He's quite a very nice, you know, intelligent, inventive presence in the middle of the park. So he will be responsible for creating a lot of the just the chances and the shot opportunities that you get from Atalanta. On the other side, you've got Ademola Lookman, who we were briefly linked with when he was baying for a move away from Atalanta, fell out with Gasperini and said, he was not really happy to be there anymore. So he's, I would say, more of a wide forward, and he's moving into those inside positions where he can run at centre back, so he doesn't have to take on the full back anymore. He'll pick up and he'll drive, get those dribbles in, move past defenders, attack the box, and from there he'll try to get shots away and sometimes, try and find another teammate there. But mostly he's geared towards being a more direct threat. So I would say quite similar to Garnacho in a way. Quite not really a winger, not really center forward, somewhere in between is how I would describe him. So those two guys are, I think, going to be quite key to Atlanta's attack. And center forward is a bit of a question mark. Gianluca Scamacca is the out and out center forward option. He's just come back from multiple injuries and had, I think, a long, long absence, after which he's not really found the same form that he did at Sassuolo. But he was in the Premier League, I think, for West Ham for a bit, and Mikhail Antonio said that he's absolutely tremendous technically, but physically was quite weak, and that's how he didn't adapt in the Premier League. But they go very long to him as early as possible when they're under the press or when they feel like they've seen an opportunity on the last line. Skamaka is quite tall, I think 6 feet 4 or something, so he can knock down those balls for Lukman, for the Ketelere. And he's also a great technical link up presence. So watch out for quick 1-2s, watch out for these layoffs into space for shots. If you can shut him down and basically negate the the link up potential that he has, then you also blunt a lot of the threat that the other two behind him have.
All right, well, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about just what some of the weaknesses are on this side so that, we might feel a little more positive about what Chelsea are going to be able to get done in this match. So stay tuned and we will be right back. All right, so let's talk about the opportunity areas. Where are the problems for Atalanta, and where do you think Enzo Maresca and the team are looking to exploit and hopefully take full advantage of when it comes to this matchup, Sam?
Yeah, I don't know if this is my bias talking, because both the games that I saw against Verona and against Fiorentina, both of them had two strikers up front, which sort of pairs well against the back three. So split strikers have caused them issues then. And this is just maybe because they push one of their center backs up. Kosunu tries to go up and try to make up the numbers in attack. We talk about just the deficiencies of a back five system or a back three system. It's that you're committing an extra man into defense, and that has repercussions in midfield, that has repercussions in attack. So you have to find a way to compensate. Obviously, even if you push your wing backs up, you still have maybe one or two people inside the box at best. So trying to balance that and trying to push your wing back up to support and trying to make your wide center back, a sort of a passing option in the attacking third, you can get a 2v2 if you have two strikers up front. And we know that Joao Pedro has struggled against a back three. We don't have Delap here. So it's an interesting one for Maresca to figure out like how he's going to play this one. I think again we might see maybe like Pedro Neto up and Joao Pedro behind him would be the ideal one, because both of them up front then cause some issues, because Neto in particular is great at running off people, running in behind, and they're not the fastest. Like I would say they're strong, but Isaac Hein and I would say Kosunu and all of these guys are still, in terms of coming up against a really quick PL attacker, could be exploited. So I would say that's one thing definitely to keep in mind. Um, we talked about the extra man in defense, so that ensures that there's a heavy burden on the attackers as well. That sort of reflects in their Champions League numbers as if you look at the amount of goals that they've scored, there's only 6 goals in 5 games so far, and there's a lot of impetus on Lookman, on the Ketelere and Skamaka to try and make openings by themselves. And there's not much you can do when you've got only three attackers trying to combine in the central part of the pitch. Obviously, on transition or when you've got maybe a rest defense of like 3 or 4 people, then that three versus our back four can be quite an interesting proposition. But if you have a settled shape and if you're trying to make openings against back four plus two in midfield, then I wouldn't give Atalanta's three quite a chance. But on the break, on long balls, Lookman is dangerous. Diketele is very, very dangerous. Kamaka can be a very good shooting threat from long range as well, has some excellent shooting. So that's something to watch out for. I would say try and blunt those three and find out ways to cut the supply line to them, and you should be good from a goal scoring perspective. Out of possession, the back three can take a 5-2-3, can be a 5-2-1-2. So generally maybe a double pivot in midfield, and that can leave a little bit of frailty or vulnerability in the middle of the park, especially on the breakdown. So if for example you're going to try and play something centrally on in transition, then there's every chance that you come up against just the center backs, who sometimes are quite reluctant to step out and address that threat. So if you can get runners against their back line, then I would give us a very good chance to open them up. And they've like the chances that have come from those opportunities against Derun, against Edison, trying to push up and make those high presses happen, have been quite nice. And the last one I'd probably say is that they've conceded 4 goals from outside the box in Serie A. So that's one of the best or worst tallies, whichever way you want to look at it. So that also probably ties into the last point, where there are some lots of shooting opportunities because the centre backs don't step up. The double pivot are given a very high responsibility because you need to support your attackers. So maybe there's a chance that you look at that zone between the midfielders and the defenders and get some nice long ranges away. So Pedro Neto, I'm looking at you. Joao Pedro, please do something. We're all waiting for it to happen.
We would love to see those type of things in this game. So hopefully that is on the books. So as we flip the script here, I'm sure there's a couple of things that you think, Enzo Maresca is considering right now. And, look, we know that obviously he's ruled Cole Palmer out of this one, but what are the other big questions that he is trying to answer right now? And why don't you throw them at me and I'll try to provide as close to an Enzo Maresca like answer as possible.
Yeah, that's, I think, the first one I'm going to draw from the review pod against Bournemouth and just say it. Is this the game to continue dropping Joao Pedro? Where obviously you want to get him back to form, but he's also not done anything in that cameo performance. So it just looks like more of the same, listless. Doesn't have purpose. So are you pushing Pedro Neto up there, or are you saying, okay, we need to get him back in form? That this is a side that has had some frailties in defense, and maybe we can try and work him back into form before we go into some really interesting league fixtures.
I mean, so Garnacho does the press conference, generally tends to indicate that a player is likely in line to start. We know that Estevao has had some really fantastic form in the Champions League so far. So I feel like that like locks in your starting wingers on the left and right hand side, which I do think means Pedro Neto, number 9, come on down. You're playing centrally in this attack, which does then open the door for Joao Pedro. But I kind of think with Moises Caicedo, with Enzo Fernandez, and with Reece James, you kind of have what your midfield grouping is going to be in this one. So I do think that he will not start Joao Pedro. He will not start Mark Guiu. I think it will be the Pedro Neto, Estevao, and Garnacho show up top to start this game.
That's a very interesting one, and we all of us sort of speculated on just, I would say, a little nudge towards Joao Pedro, because when Delap went injured, all of us thought, okay, he's going to bring on JP, and then he brought on Mark Guiu before him. And I don't know if that was a certain slight towards him, saying, look, I would prefer playing the kid over you, and maybe just get your game back up together. So maybe this is, him sending a message and asking him to respond. So I think it's quite an intriguing one for me. As long as we can get our strongest 11, because like you mentioned, there's no room for slipping up now, because if we do that, then there's 2 extra games to go up against, and we do not want that in the middle of a crowded fixture. So I would definitely go with Pedro Neto. I've been banging this drum since last season when we lost Jackson and Guiu both. I think it's a very viable option to play, and especially because Neto is played with somebody like a Matheus Cunha at Wolves, who I would say is quite a similar player. He's not a centre forward, but more of a support striker, somebody who likes playing in the hole, and both of them had a really good rapport together. So put Pedro Neto centrally and ask Joao Pedro to link up with him and give him the space away from the centre backs, and maybe something happens. The other question for me, Dan, is quite interestingly 2 players. So they're now on top of the minutes chart. So Enzo Fernandez is on 1,689 minutes. He's made 19 out of 21 starts. And then there's Marco Correa, who's done 1,668, 1821. So are you figuring any rest for any of those guys before some hectic fixtures, or is it just a case of it's my strongest side and I'm going to play them? Because Kukurea in particular has come up against Lamine Yamal, Bukayo Saka. Hey, luckily he didn't have to come up against Antoine Semenyo, but just a very, very brutal set of physically exerting fixtures. So are you bringing in Hato? Are you bringing in somebody to give Kukurea relief? Enzo, obviously you cannot rotate because there's no Caicedo. Actually, there is Caicedo. Yeah, Champions League. Oh, yeah. So you can rotate him as well. So, yeah. So are you making a switch here with, say, Caicedo and Andre Santos, or are you sticking with what's working?
So I think it is going to be the how do I get my strongest lineup out there. I do think, however, the Kukurea question is viable. I mean, it is a fair question to be asking. And when you look at the fact that Rob Sanchez has played the most minutes in the Premier League, Marc Cucurella is just behind him in total minutes played in the Premier League, 1,256 minutes. It's Enzo Fernandez and Trev Chalobah after that. Those are the 4 players who've eclipsed 1,200 minutes in the Premier League. Then you flip it, and actually Enzo Fernandez and Marco Correa are your 2 largest contributors. That's right, ahead of Rob Sanchez across all competition. Enzo is close to 1,700 minutes. He's just 11 minutes away, so he'll likely hit that in this match. And then Marco Correa is at 1,668 minutes. Then you kind of go down to like Pedro Neto, like the drop after our 2 defenders there, our goalkeeper and Trev Chalobah is 1,400. Caicedo is 1,389. So you have some substantial extra minutes on Marco Correa and Enzo Fernandez. I think you were hoping you'd like to get some of them some minutes. I just don't think you can get Enzo necessarily the break in this one. I do think it would be interesting to see if he would try something else other than Cucurella. We haven't, Hato's played 528 minutes. He's made 6 starts. He's had 8 appearances. I mean, that is the lowest number of starts across the, like, Bonanote has 6. If you're looking at like who has starts, I mean, Cole Palmer, who's been injured, has 6. Guiu, what matches played? Jorgensen has 3 starts. I mean, there's just some really interesting stuff here in terms of like Hato is really not getting any type of like lead in, buy in here to find a path, make a path for himself. And so I just think even though Kukurea looks like he needs some rest, I don't think he's going to get it. I don't think that is going to be one that wins out here.
Like Alex Ferguson used to say, you always start your strongest 11. You can make early changes, but you absolutely have to start your 11, and then from there, you do your best effort and you make changes accordingly. So, like you mentioned, maybe the idea is to 100% get them, in that situation where Kukurea is done after 60 minutes and Enzo Fernandez can come off and have a little bit of a breather. And that would be the ideal circumstance. It just hasn't happened yet. So, December Chels, we all know, Dan, how that turns out. So, not going to be an easy fixture. But yeah, definitely one that I think Enzo Maresca won't probably think too much about. Just play your strongest side and worry about the rest later. So, we will now move on to the favorite part of our show, on the ledge predictions, then, as well as a scoreline for me, please. What are you thinking?
Ooh, well, the recent Chelsea scorelines have not been ones that we have loved, considering it was a 1-1 draw to Arsenal, a 3-1 draw, 3-1 loss to Leeds, and a 0-0 draw against Bournemouth. So Chelsea have not been able to eclipse not even above 2.0 xG since the game against Wolves, where he had 3.3. Burnley was 1.7. Barcelona was 1.8. Obviously, Burnley and Barcelona, we outperformed both of those. So very nice to see. I think this is a game where we actually have a 2.0 xG and we overachieve that. So I think it's a 3-goal game. I think we have a 2+ on the xG total. Look, if a random, and maybe one of those is a penalty. I think I think Estevao draws a penalty, which gives us 0.8 right there on the old xG chart, and then we make up the rest as we go along there. But I think those are the things that I will add for my on the ledge prediction.
It's a good solid one to make because, like we mentioned in the strengths part, they do push the wing backs up very regularly. I don't know if the tactics are going to change because with Gasperini, you knew what to expect. It was going to be lots of pressing, everybody pushing forward, trying to win the ball back. We've got a new manager in the helm now, so probably going to be maybe a little bit of a hybrid approach. But if the wing backs are still pushing up, which they have to do to support the attack, then there's every chance you get Estevao against Jim City or you get Garnacho against Kosunu, and you can make some really really good stuff happen. They've only conceded, I believe, one penalty in Serie A, so the penalty one is definitely an on the ledge. So I'll give you that one. So the scoreline, did you mention?
So I think it will be 3-1. I think we'll give up
Mm-hmm.
some odd goal here, just because I don't. My question around like is Wes Fofana ready to start playing consecutive
Mm-hmm.
matches? That's my probably biggest concern. If he's not, I'm a little bit more concerned that we will not be able to retain some of the strong and solid defensive pairing that has been able to produce some better results for us.
I think Trev Chalobah also inching towards some really dangerous minutes, considering he's been, the most solid of the two between him and Tosin. And obviously, Josh Achepong is still waiting in the wings. And Enzo Maresca did say that he maybe regretted playing, Tosin over Josh Achepong because of the aerial duel stuff against Leeds. So maybe this is the chance he gets, who knows? And then I wouldn't be averse to seeing him for a nice 30, 40-minute stretch. So that's definitely one that I will keep an eye on. For me, the scoreline is probably a more modest, I would say a 2-1. It's going to be quite scrappy. So I will keep it a 2-1 away win. My on the ledge prediction is there's going to be an out of the box screamer from
Ooh,
maybe
okay.
one of our wingers. Yeah, Garnacho or Estevao. And bonus points for me if it's Joao Pedro. But I think it's going to be Neto, Estevao, or Garnacho getting a goal from outside the box.
Ooh, yeah, that predicting a goal of the season type of contender in this type of match after the last couple performances would be the most Chelsea thing that we possibly could do. So I do hope that it comes to fruition, and I do think that we would all love to see a Chelsea victory here. We predicted draws, and Chelsea have won. We predicted losses, and Chelsea have done the opposite of that. So again, don't put any stock in what our actual prediction is. Just don't blame us if they lose on this one after we predict a win, because we always want to predict Chelsea winning the games. But look, That's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to get notified on YouTube if you'd like to continue supporting the podcast. You also can leave comments on the video to let us know that you love the fact that we're putting out all this wonderful content for you. You can leave 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's always appreciated too. Helps people find the show. Lets them know that it's worth listening to. You also can sign up for our free weekly newsletter, the London's Blue Dispatch, written by our good friend Sam as well. And if you want to, join our Discord community in either a free or paid capacity. But it's going to do it for this episode. So thank you so much for listening. Until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.